It seemed like an ordinary afternoon, a quiet family home with nothing special about it. But behind the doors, a deadly danger was waiting. A dog, large and powerful, who appeared to be just a pet, carried with it a haunting past from the battlefield. As the criminals closed in, they had no idea that the true protector wasn't a person, but a silent warrior. Before continuing the story, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. No more waiting, the story begins right now. The California sun burned high over the Carter Ranch, casting long shadows across the quiet, dusty yard. In the distance, Sophie Carter laughed as she played fetch with Titan, her towering Great Dane, whose muscular frame moved with a grace that belied his size. To anyone passing by, Titan was just a gentle giant, a devoted companion to a 12-year-old girl. But beneath his calm, watchful eyes lay the instincts of a seasoned warrior, one who had faced battles most could never imagine. When a black van crept toward their property that afternoon, carrying men with dangerous intentions, they saw only a child and her oversized pet. What they didn't know was that Titan wasn't just a dog. He was a soldier, a retired Marine with 3 tours in Afghanistan, and he was ready for one last mission. Lily Carter stood at her kitchen window, watching her 12-year-old daughter Sophie playing in their expansive backyard with Titan, their Great Dane. The morning sun cast long shadows across their property on the outskirts of Riverside, California. To most people, Titan appeared to be just another family pet, albeit an enormous one. But Lily knew better. Before becoming their guardian, Titan had served 3 tours in Afghanistan as a military working dog, specializing in explosive detection and personnel protection. Lily's late husband, James, had been Titan's handler in the Marines. When both were wounded in their final tour, James had made arrangements for Titan to retire with his family should anything happen to him. Lily's throat tightened as she remembered the day 2 uniformed officers had appeared at her door 2 years ago. James hadn't survived his injuries, but he'd made sure his partner would be there to protect his family. The transition hadn't been easy. Titan had arrived with his own battle scars, both physical and emotional. Like many veterans, he suffered from PTSD, startling at sudden noises and growing anxious during thunderstorms. But Sophie had been his saving grace. The girl had shown infinite patience, sitting quietly with Titan during his difficult moments, reading to him, and gradually helping him adjust to civilian life. Now, watching them play fetch with Sophie's favorite red ball, it was hard to imagine Titan had once been a hardened military asset. Lily glanced at her watch and called out through the open window, "Sophie, time to get ready for school." Sophie caught the ball one last time and jogged toward the house, Titan following dutifully at her heels. The Great Dane's gray-blue coat gleamed in the morning light, his muscular frame moving with fluid grace despite the slight limp in his back leg, a permanent reminder of his military service. "Can't Titan come to school with me today?" Sophie asked as she entered the kitchen, her long brown hair windswept from playing. "Career day is next week, and I want to practice my presentation about military docs." Lily smiled, running a hand through her daughter's tangled hair. "Sorry, sweetheart. You know the school doesn't allow pets, even retired hero docs." Titan sat beside Sophie, his head level with her shoulder even while seated. At 7 years old, he was in his prime for a Great Dane, weighing in at 170 pounds of solid muscle. His warm brown eyes watched the exchange between mother and daughter with intelligent interest. "He's not just a pet," Sophie protested, wrapping her arms around Titan's thick neck. "He's family." "That he is," Lily agreed, "which is why he needs to stay here and guard the house while we're gone. Now go get dressed or we'll be late." As Sophie thundered up the stairs, Lily knelt beside Titan, scratching behind his ears. "Keep an eye on things, soldier," she whispered. It was their morning ritual, a reminder of his ongoing mission to protect their home. Titan's ears pricked forward, and he pressed his nose against her hand in acknowledgement. Sometimes Lily swore he understood every word they said. 20 minutes later, they were in Lily's SUV, backing out of their long driveway. Their house sat on 5 acres of land, offering privacy but also isolation. Lily had chosen it specifically because it gave Titan plenty of room to run without bothering neighbors who might be uncomfortable with a dog his size. Titan watched from the front window as they drove away, his stance alert and protective as always. Neither Lily nor Sophie could have known that this ordinary Tuesday morning would soon turn into anything but ordinary. 3 miles from the Carter home, a black van sat idling behind in Desert View Station. Inside, 4 men studied satellite images on a laptop screen. "The house is isolated," said Rafael Ramirez, pointing to the Carter property. "No neighbors within shouting distance." His English carried a slight Mexican accent, but his tone was all business. "What about the dog?" asked one of his men, a stocky individual named Victor. "That thing looks huge." Rafael waved dismissively. "It's just a family pet. Trank it if you have to, but don't kill it unless absolutely necessary. We don't want to attract attention with gunfire." The men nodded. They'd been tracking Lily Carter for weeks, ever since learning she worked as a senior accountant at the Riverside branch of First National Bank. They needed her access codes to wire money from certain accounts belonging to rival organizations that had been causing problems for their cartel back in Mexico. "Remember," Rafael continued, "we grab the girl when she gets home from school. The mother will cooperate once we have her daughter." He checked his watch. 3:30. That gives us plenty of time to set up. What Rafael and his men couldn't know, was that they weren't dealing with an ordinary family pet. They had no idea that the massive Great Dane they'd observed through surveillance photos had once been designated as one of the Marine Corps' most effective working dogs, or that he still maintained his military training despite his retirement. They were about to learn. The school day passed uneventfully for Sophie. She excelled in her classes, particularly enjoying her science period where they were studying animal behavior. During lunch, she worked on her upcoming presentation about military working dogs, proud to share Titan's story with her classmates. At 3:15, Sophie walked out of the school building with her best friend Hannah. They chatted about their weekend plans as they waited for their respective rides. "Mom said I could sleep over on Friday," Hannah said excitedly. "We can work on our science project and watch movies with Titan." Sophie beamed. "He loves when you visit. Remember how he tried to sit in your lap last time?" Both girls giggled at the memory of the enormous dog attempting to be a lapdog. Hannah's mother arrived first, honking and waving. Sophie waved goodbye to her friend, then settled on a bench to wait for her own ride. Time ticked by. 3:30 came and went. Sophie checked her phone, but there were no messages from her mother. This was unusual. Lily was typically very punctual and always called if she was running late. At 3:45, Sophie's phone buzzed. It was a text from her mom, running late at work. "Walk home today? Beautiful afternoon for it." Sophie frowned. Something felt off about the message. Her mom never asked her to walk home without discussing it in advance. And the phrasing seemed strange, but the house was only a mile away, and she'd walked it before with Titan. Still uncertain. Sophie typed back, "What's the password?" It was their family security question, something her father had instituted years ago. If either of them were in trouble or being coerced, they would either give the wrong password or not answer at all. The response came quickly. "Don't be silly, honey. Just start walking. I'll try to meet you halfway." Sophie's heart began to race. That wasn't protocol. Her mother would have known to provide the password. Something was very wrong. With trembling fingers, Sophie opened her emergency contacts and pressed the button for Mrs. Thompson, their elderly neighbor who lived a quarter-mile down the road. As the phone rang, Sophie walked quickly toward the school building, planning to ask the office to call the police. She never made it. A hand clamped over her mouth from behind, and strong arms lifted her off the ground. Sophie tried to scream, but the sound was muffled against the gloved hand. She kicked and thrashed as she was carried toward a black van parked in the teacher's lot. "Stop struggling," a heavily accented voice hissed in her ear. "We don't want to hurt you, but we will if we have to." Sophie was thrown into the van's dark interior. Before she could scramble away, zip ties were fastened around her wrists and ankles. A piece of duct tape was pressed over her mouth. "Drive," ordered the same voice. The van's engine roared to life and they peeled out of the parking lot. Through her terror, Sophie forced herself to focus, just as her father had taught her. She noted details: 4 men, speaking both English and Spanish, all wearing black clothes and ski masks. The van smelled of cigarettes and gun oil. They turned right out of the school, then left, heading toward her house. One of the men was on a phone. "We have the girl. Call her mother. Tell her what we want." Sophie closed her eyes and prayed, not for herself, but for whoever had threatened her mother into sending that text. They didn't know what they were walking into. They didn't know about Titan. At the Carter home, Titan's afternoon had been anything but peaceful. His military training had kicked in the moment 4 unfamiliar vehicles had approached the property 2 hours earlier. He'd watched from various windows as 8 men had taken up positions around the house, 2 disappearing into the woods that bordered the back of the property. Titan knew something was wrong. These men moved like predators, and they carried weapons. He could smell the gun oil and cordite. More importantly, they weren't supposed to be there. And protecting the property was his mission. The Great Dane moved silently through the house, staying away from windows while keeping track of the intruders' positions. His combat instincts, honed through years of military service, told him this was a coordinated operation. They were waiting for something or someone. When Lily's car pulled into the driveway at 3:15, Titan's anxiety peaked. He watched helplessly as 2 men emerged from the woods behind her, pressing guns against her back as she unlocked the door. His training warred with his protective instincts. He wanted to attack, but he recognized a hostage situation. In Afghanistan, he'd learned that rushing in wasn't always the best solution. "Call your daughter," one of the men ordered as they entered. "Tell her you're running late and she should walk home." Lily's hands shook as she pulled out her phone. "Please," she begged, "leave Sophie out of this. I'll give you whatever you want." "The codes to the bank's international wire transfer system, for starters," said Raphael, entering from the kitchen where he'd been waiting. "But first, we need insurance that you'll cooperate. Call your daughter." Titan remained hidden upstairs, watching through the railing. Lily's eyes darted around the room, and for a split second, they met his. He saw the silent command there, "Wait." Lily sent the text. Moments later, Sophie's response came asking for the password. Titan saw Lily's slight smile. Their clever girl remembered her training. "What password?" Raphael demanded, grabbing the phone. He typed a response himself, ignoring the security protocol. "Now we wait," Raphael said, settling into an armchair while his men kept their weapons trained on Lily. "Your daughter will be here soon, and then you'll help us move some money around. After that, if you cooperate, you'll both walk away from this." Lily said nothing, but her hands were clenched into fists. Titan could smell her fear, but also her anger. He remained still, gathering intelligence, waiting for the right moment. His military training had taught him patience. Sometimes the best attack required perfect timing. 15 minutes later, a black van pulled into the driveway. Titan heard Sophie's muffled cries before she was dragged into the house, bound and terrified. "Mom!" she screamed as soon as the tape was pulled from her mouth. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby," Lily assured her. Though her voice shook, "Everything's going to be fine." Raphael pulled Sophie roughly away from her mother. "That depends on your cooperation, Mrs. Carter." Now, about those bank codes, that's when Titan made his move. The Great Dane had been a specialized military working dog, trained not just for detection, but for direct action against armed threats. He'd been taught to disarm opponents, to incapacitate without killing when possible, and to protect civilians at all costs. Most importantly, he'd learned to use surprise and chaos to his advantage. Titan launched himself from the top of the stairs with explosive power, 170 pounds of muscle and tactical training, targeting the man holding Sophie. His jaws clamped down on the man's arm with precisely calculated force, enough to disable but not sever. The man screamed, dropping both Sophie and his weapon. The room erupted into chaos. Titan released his first target and spawned with battlefield grace, positioning himself between the civilians and the remaining threats. His lips pulled back from massive teeth, a deep growl resonating through the room like distant thunder. "Shoot it!" Raphael screamed, raising his own weapon. But Titan was already moving. He'd been trained to recognize firearms as priority threats, and his next attack targeted Raphael's wrist. Bones crunched between powerful jaws, and the gun clattered to the floor. Lily was moving too. The moment Titan attacked, she grabbed Sophie and pulled her behind the kitchen counter. Now she reached for the weapon that had skittered across the floor. The remaining men found themselves in an impossible situation. Their leader was down, screaming in pain, and they faced both an expertly trained military dog and an angry mother with a gun. When Titan turned his blood-stained muzzle toward them, lips pulled back in a snarl that promised violence. Their nerves broke. Two ran for the door. Titan allowed them to flee. He'd been trained to prioritize threats, and these men were choosing flight over fight. The third raised his hands in surrender. His weapon dropped at his feet. "On your knees," Lily ordered, her voice steady despite her terror. "Face down, hands behind your head." Within 10 minutes, police sirens filled the air. Mrs. Thompson had called 911 after Sophie's aborted phone call. The Carters' property was soon swarming with law enforcement officers, including several FBI agents who'd been tracking this particular cartel cell. As the suspects were led away in handcuffs and paramedics checked Sophie and Lily for injuries, Titan sat alertly between them, his stance still protective. Sophie's arms were wrapped around his thick neck, her tears soaking into his fur. "You saved us," she whispered. "You're not just a retired war dog. You're our hero." Titan turned his head to lick her cheek. His mission complete. The property was secure and his family was safe. But he maintained his vigilant watch as statements were taken and evidence was collected. His training telling him the job wasn't done until his charges were completely out of danger. In the weeks that followed, the Carter household slowly returned to normal, though with some changes. The FBI had helped them upgrade their security system, and Lily had taken a leave of absence from the bank. Sophie had been brave throughout the ordeal, attending counseling sessions and working through her trauma with remarkable resilience. Titan's role in the family shifted subtly. While he'd always been their protector, now everyone understood just how seriously he took that responsibility. His military training hadn't faded with retirement. It had simply been redirected toward a new and equally important mission. 1 month after the incident, Sophie finally gave her presentation at school about military working dogs. She stood proudly before her class, Titan sitting regally beside her as she shared their story. "Some people think that when military dogs retire, they stop being warriors," she told her classmates. "But that's not true. They just find new battles to fight and new people to protect." Titan wasn't just trained to detect explosives or chase bad guys in Afghanistan. He was trained to save lives and protect people he cares about. And that's exactly what he did for my mom and me. Lily watched from the back of the classroom, wiping tears from her eyes as Sophie continued her presentation. Titan's gaze regularly swept the room, ever vigilant, ever protective. But there was contentment in his posture now. He'd proven himself again, shown that even retired warriors still had fight left in them when it mattered most. That evening, as the family sat together on their back porch watching the sunset, Sophie reading a book while Titan lay at her feet, Lily reflected on how differently things could have turned out without their four-legged guardian. She reached down to scratch behind Titan's ears, and the Great Dane leaned into her touch, his brown eyes warm with devotion. "Thank you for keeping your promise to James," she whispered. "Thank you for protecting our little girl." Titan's tail thumped against the porch boards, and he shifted slightly to press against Sophie's legs. In his mind, there was nothing to thank him for. This was his family, his home, his mission, and like any good soldier, he would guard them until his last breath. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, a peaceful end to another day. But Titan remained alert, his senses tuned to his surroundings, ready to defend his loved ones should the need arise again. He was no longer just a retired war dog. He was a family's guardian angel, a promise kept, a warrior who had found his most important mission yet, and he wouldn't have it any other way. Later that night, as Sophie slept peacefully in her bed with Titan stretched out on the floor beside her, Lily sat at her kitchen table looking through an old photo album. She found the picture she was searching for, James in his Marine Corps uniform, kneeling beside a younger Titan, both of them dusty from training but grinning at the camera. The photograph had been taken just before their last deployment together. Lily traced her finger over her late husband's face. "You knew, didn't you?" she whispered to the image. "You knew Titan would be more than just a pet. You were making sure we'd be protected even when you couldn't be here." A soft whine made her look up. Titan stood in the kitchen doorway, having left his post by Sophie's bed momentarily to check on her. His nails clicked softly on the tile floor as he patted over to rest his head on her lap, looking at the photograph with what seemed like recognition. "Want to see more pictures of you and Dad?" Lily asked softly, turning the page. Titan's tail wagged gently as she showed him photographs documenting his military career, training exercises, ceremony appearances, even one of him wearing protective goggles and tactical gear before a mission. "Sophie asked me today if you miss being a military dog," Lily said, scratching his favorite spot behind his ears. "I told her I thought you'd found an even more important job." Titan's eyes met hers with that deep intelligence that sometimes took her breath away. In moments like these, she could see why the military had chosen him for their program. There was something special about Titan that went beyond his size and strength, a nobility of spirit that made him not just a good dog, but a great one. The next morning, Sophie came downstairs to find her mother making pancakes while Titan supervised from his spot near the kitchen island. Since the incident, their morning routine had shifted slightly. Titan now insisted on doing a perimeter check of the property before Sophie went outside to play, and he developed a habit of positioning himself where he could see both the front door and whatever family member he was guarding. "Mom," Sophie said, sliding onto a stool, "I was thinking about something. Remember how it used to say that sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is come home and learn to live in peace?" Lily nodded, flipping a pancake. "I remember. I think that's what Titan did," Sophie continued, reaching out to stroke Titan's broad head. "He was super brave in Afghanistan, but maybe it was just as brave to learn how to be our dog, especially after losing Dad. And then, when we needed him to be a soldier again, he could do that too." Lily had to take a deep breath to steady herself, moved by her daughter's insight. "That's very wise, sweetheart. Your father would be so proud of how you've helped Titan adjust to civilian life." "We helped each other," Sophie said simply. "After Dad died, I needed someone to talk to who understood what it felt like to miss him that much. Titan knew exactly how I felt." Titan pressed against Sophie's legs, as if confirming her words. The bond between them had grown even stronger since the attack, if that was possible. Sophie's nightmares had decreased significantly in the past month, largely because she knew Titan was always there, standing guard. That afternoon, they received a special visitor. Lieutenant Colonel Richards, who had overseen the military working dog program during Titan's service, had heard about the incident and driven down from the base to see them. "I'm not surprised," he said, watching Titan play fetch with Sophie in the backyard. "These dogs never really retire. They just redirect their training. Titan was one of our best, smart, loyal, and with an incredible capacity to read situations. Those instincts don't go away." He turned to Lily. "We've had several requests to use Titan's story in our training programs, if you're willing. It's a perfect example of why we spend so much time and resources on these dogs, and why finding the right homes for them after retirement is so crucial." Lily watched as Sophie threw the ball again, Titan's powerful body launching into action. Despite his gray muzzle and the old injury that gave him a slight limp, he moved with the same precision and grace that had made him such an effective military asset. "Of course," she agreed, "people should know that these dogs never stop serving. They just find new missions. Titan's mission now is protecting his family, and he does it with the same dedication he showed in Afghanistan." Lieutenant Colonel Richards nodded. James would be proud. He always said Titan was special, even among working dogs. Seems he was right. That evening, as the family sat watching television together, Lily looked at their unusual little family. A young girl wise beyond her years, a retired war dog who had found a new purpose, and herself stronger than she'd ever thought possible. They had been through trauma together, but had emerged closer and more resilient. Titan lay stretched out on his bed in the corner, appearing to doze, but Lily knew, still alert to any unusual sounds or movements. He was their guardian, their protector, their hero. But more than that, he was the living embodiment of James's love for them, a promise kept across time and distance. Sophie slipped off the couch and went to curl up next to Titan, who lifted his head to accommodate her. "Love you, Titan," she whispered, burying her face in his fur. Titan's tail thumped against the floor, his brown eyes soft with affection as he watched over his family. He might be retired from the battlefield, but he had found something worth fighting for right here at home. And as long as he drew breath, he would ensure that no harm came to the people he loved. Some would say it was just instinct, just training, but Lily knew better. It was love, pure and simple. The same love that had driven James to ensure his family would be protected even after he was gone. The same love that had helped a war dog become a gentle companion to a grieving little girl. The same love that had given Titan the strength to become a warrior once more when his family needed him most. In the end, that's what made Titan more than just a retired military dog. He was a guardian, a friend, a family member, and in those roles he had found his truest and most noble purpose. This story isn't just a battle between humans and their enemies. It's a testament to love, loyalty, and unconditional devotion. Titan, the battle-hardened dog who has faced the harshest of wars, ultimately finds his most important mission: protecting his family, the ones he loves. The bond between the little girl and Titan is not just that of a pet and its owner, but a symbol of sincere affection, sacrifice, and mutual protection. The heart-pounding moments, the intense action, not only keep us on edge, but also make us reflect on the deeper values of life. Just like Titan, we all need to find our purpose, our reason to fight and protect what matters most in our lives. And Titan has shown us that whether a warrior or a pet, the mission of safeguarding family and loved ones is the highest calling. If this story has moved you and you're eager for more thought-provoking tales, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to bringing you more inspiring and meaningful stories in the future. See you in the next video.